Were you a Fantastic Four guy, Avengers guy, or an X-Men guy?
I was DC, so for me it was Justice League.
Neither of us are square enough to be Fantastic Four. You might have liked the Avengers. I liked the X-Men, the Underground, the Mutants. But I really liked the Avengers movie. I really, really liked the Avengers movie because it's really good. It's about as good as one of these could be, one of these being a $250 million superhero action epic. And that's because it's in the hands of a really talented director, Joss Whedon, who checks all of the right boxes. There's enough funny scenes, there's enough good action scenes, there's enough good effects moments, there's enough kind of character interaction between characters that on one hand seem fake and unbelievable because they're Asgardian gods or super soldiers, superheroes, or the smartest genius in the world, who also is Robert Downey Jr., but they seem like real-ish, human-ish beings that have interactions that seem like the interactions that real theoretical people might have in those kind of circumstances. There's enough boxes checked that it works as a movie, but what makes the thing achieve a level of satisfaction for me is the fact that Joss Whedon did this really interesting thing, which is he made the first 2/3 of the movie pretty bad. I'm going to assume it's on purpose rather than just because of a lack of budget, because there's a joke, that I can't spoil. The moment of the film is the key to understanding that you've been set up by the kind of grim, kind of meager, kind of dour and disappointing first 2/3 of the film, to be surprised by the amazingness of the last third of the film. The battles in the first 2/3 of the movie, when they happen, they take place in dank, unlit basements full of steam pipes. It was horrible cliche, or they take place in forests at night. Most of the action is constrained on the Avengers helicarrier, which is neat, but extremely claustrophobic, and nothing in the first 2/3 of the film feels large or has any kind of scope befitting a $220 million, epic action movie. And at a certain point you feel like, oh my God, this is kind of, is he directing a TV show? Does he not know that he has all this money? Was he afraid to go shoot somewhere outside of a studio? And then the third act arrives and you realize that you've just been set up. You've been led down a garden path to believe that you're gonna watch this dour, kind of constrained, claustrophobic movie, and then the whole thing just explodes into the biggest, largest, biggest scope action, flying through the air, incredible vistas, giant panoramas with characters swooping in and doing action poses that they weren't doing before and being heroic in a way that they weren't being before. It was all a setup, the first 2/3, and that's what makes the movie really work. The other movie that does this, weirdly, not the only one, but the one that is the archetype for this kind of filmmaking, is one of the best movies ever made by one of the best directors who ever worked, and that's Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock. Nobody remembers that Psycho initially, for the first bulk of that movie, is a movie about missing stolen money. Of course, everybody remembers what it ends up being about. What it ends up being about is burned into our minds because it's an iconic shot and it's an iconic film full of iconic moments, and all of those gain their iconic power in part because Hitchcock pulls the rug out from under you halfway through his film and says, haha, this movie isn't what you thought it was about, it's actually about something else. And that's what Joss Whedon kind of does with the Avengers, certainly in terms of scope and scale, and it's a really neat trick that makes the thing really feel like it's just filling you with vibrancy and power, which is exactly what comics did for me when I was a kid. So if you want to watch a completely different movie that has the same kind of, I bet you thought you were watching this kind of movie, turns out you're watching this other kind of movie action going instead, watch The Master at Work with Psycho instead. Completely different,